morning, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor at Lincoln Square, and welcome to the weekly assignment where executive producer Sam Osterhout and I talk about what's coming up on Lincoln Square this week, the latest headlines, and what we can all do to fight back against authoritarianism. Welcome, Sam, and we have a special guest with us today. We have Lavora Barnes, who I know from my time in Michigan. She is the longtime former party chair of the Democratic Party and has been involved in races across the country, ran Obama's 2012 campaign in Michigan. You've been in Virginia, you've been everywhere. And you are a great person to bring in because we have some pretty exciting election news over the weekend.
Some big things happened. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Let's start with Texas. Not the place that you expect Republicans to have a problem, but there were a couple special elections, both for the state Senate and for Congress, and Democrats did much better than expected.
They did incredibly well. And, Texas is a state that a lot of Democrats threw their hands up and just said, we're done with Texas. We can't get anything done here. To see this happen in Texas this past weekend is heartening about what's happening across the country. And I think, one of the lessons we need to take from Texas is you compete everywhere, which is the strategy we operated on here in Michigan as I was the chair, and we continue to operate on. It's like we run candidates all over. And also you run candidates from home, candidates who are, part of that community and who can speak to the issues to that community. Now, the national issues are important, and we all need to be talking about the importance of fighting back on fascism and how we're going to stand up to ICE and how we're going to stand up to Trump and all of that. All of that's important. But you also have to sprinkle in a little bit about the issues that matter to the people at home. And it feels to me like those candidates in Texas did a great job of talking about affordability, of talking about education. And by the way, guys, when was the last time we talked about education in a political campaign? Because we've stopped talking about that. And that's an issue that people care about. When you look around, when I look at my grandkids, I care what's happening in our education system. And I know others do too. So I think, Democrats need to remember that there are lots of issues that matter to local candidates and local voters, and we need to be talking about all of them.
I wonder, we talk about local issues all the time, and I think particularly in my town's race for alderman, like we talk about potholes in the street and whether or not we need stop signs or stoplights or where the lines are painted on the road, that kind of thing. And I think the Republicans have had a lot of success hammering on these national sort of Byzantine issues that are really wedge-based, that have little impact locally, right? But Trump has localized national issues.
Yes.
So immigration is really a national issue, but he's brought it into the American heartland and has created real urgency on the local level. Do you think that is having an impact on races like the one in Texas?
I think it is, and I think it might be having the opposite impact of Trump's intention. I think that the more you see ICE in neighborhoods, ICE in the streets where people live, ICE near people's schools and people's churches and places of medical care and all of that, the more you see ICE grabbing children off the street, the more you see ICE clearly murdering people in the street, the more not only does that become local, but it becomes an issue that we can, as Democrats and progressives, say to voters, look, guys, if your candidates on the other side of the aisle aren't willing and able to stand up to Trump and to this fascism, then they don't have a right to be representing you anymore in whatever level, whether it's school board, frankly, or it's Congress. And I think that, the more we tie folks who are willing to step up, to speak up, and to fight back to those issues, the more we will win. And I think that, as you watch everybody, and I have to say, guys, I know you've seen it too, on social media, people I follow who talk about home decorating, who talk about fashion, are now talking about immigration and talking about ICE. And that tells you a lot about where this country is. They have gone too far. They have taken it to a place that the people of this country are just saying no more. And I think that when they don't back down and when people on the Republican side of the aisle don't stand up to it, they're going to see consequences at the ballot box.
I wanted to ask you, because some of the analysis that I've read about these Texas specials is not so much that Democrats were able to increase turnout, but it's actually Republican voters who are staying home and independents are flipping. And I'm wondering from a strategy standpoint, what Democrats can do with that kind of, where Republicans are at psychologically right now for the midterm.
Yeah, I think that the more we continue to hammer those issues, the more disheartened the Republicans become. I think that, independents continue to support candidates on the Democratic side of the aisle because they see that what's happening on the right has gone too far. And I think one of the things that we need to think about doing is finding ways to increase our turnout, right? Because there are going to be races where we're still going to need the Dems to turn out heavily in order for us to win, even while the independents come over and the Republicans stay home. And we can't count on the Republicans staying home forever. Like, that's just not how this is going to work. So if we don't take the opportunity to build something that helps turn out Democrats using these issues as a catalyst to do that, then we're not going to continue to win. And we've had some really great wins, but if we want to sustain this, which we have to, not just through 26, but through 28 and through 30, we have to sustain it in order to take it all back. And in order to do that, we've got to build something. And that means we invest in infrastructure. That means we show up in communities now. We don't wait until 20 days before the election to show up. And that means we have sometimes tough conversations with folks about what it means to participate in these elections and know that maybe you don't get everything you want right away, but you still have to participate, because otherwise you get what we have now.
I want to talk a little more about the Republican response, because Trump still seems to have his head in the sand about all of this. I think we have a clip about his response to the election in Texas.
President, on Texas, a Democrat won the special election in an area that you had won by 17 points. What is your reaction to that?
I don't know. I didn't hear about it. Somebody ran where?
In Texas, a special election for legislative
the 9th state Senate seat.
I'm not involved in that. That's a local Texas race. You mean I won by 17 and this person lost? Things like that happen.
Does it worry you about the
Well, you don't know whether or not it's transferable. I'm not on the ballot, so you don't know whether or not it's transferable. But, you put the Democrats in, you'll end up with open borders again. You'll end up with crime all over the place. We have no crime anymore. I mean, think of it. The country has the lowest crime it's had in 125 years. In recorded history. The year 1900. That's a long time ago. So it's very good. No, I don't know anything about it. I didn't know. I mean, I know there's a race going there. And it's too bad. What can I say? I have nothing to do with it. Yeah.
So obviously that's not true, because we also have this, which came, late last week before the election, where he clearly chimed in, trying to support this candidate. So my question is, this head in the sand sort of business is typical for Trump. But it seems to come at a really terrible moment for the Republicans when polling is just I'm sorry to put this delicately, but in the shit can. It is terrible, the polling. Is this an opportunity for Democrats? And how do we play this kind of, the top of their ticket, the top of the Republican ticket is disputing how unpopular he is?
Well, he's always going to do that, right? But this is who he is. This is classic Trump. He refuses to admit he lost, we'll recall, and he will continue to pretend like he is, the king of this nation and a beloved king that everyone supports and that can do no wrong. It's absolutely an opportunity, and I think that as we look to a leader, a nationwide leader for the Democrats, I think this is a time for folks to step up and speak up and to speak truth to this so-called power. And I also believe that the more we tell the truth and tell the stories of what's actually happening across the country, the more he looks ridiculous as he stands there and claims that things are true that aren't, or aren't true that are. And we've allowed this. And to say this, I love that you guys are having this conversation, because so much of the mainstream media also head in the sand as they watch Donald Trump pretend things that aren't true and say things that aren't true. And if we aren't speaking out and telling the truth here, who will. So happy to be here with you all so that we can actually tell the truth of this story while other folks sort of look away and go, oh, I don't see anything over there, but it's real. And he continues to do it.
What I'm wondering, I mean, when you're listening to his meandering reaction to all this, I'm wondering if he really did remember if there was a Texas election. I mean, he seems really confused.
You know, I'm not a medical professional, but I have seen folks in decline. I have spent some time with folks with dementia and Alzheimer's and other things. There's definitely something not quite right with Donald Trump. And I think that you make a good point that in the moment that he was asked that question, he really may not have known that there was a race, or may not have known what race they were talking about, may not remember that he had anything to do with that race, may not remember that his excessive use of capital letters in his message about that race. We don't know. That's another thing that's frightening that's going on in this country. We don't know about the health of our president. We get these crazy stories where he says, I had an MRI and I had the best MRI anybody's ever had. And I took an intelligence test and I got all 5 questions right. Come on, something's wrong. And I don't know how we're going to ever find out what that is, but yeah, there's a lot of questions there.
I think one of the scariest parts about that is it kind of doesn't matter, right? And that's what's maybe worse, is that he could be really incapacitated and yet still operating at the same level he's operated for the last 10 years.
Yeah, that is a little bit frightening too. And it also begs the question as we think about like his cognitive ability, his ability to make decisions, who's making the decisions, whose decisions, whose ideas is he taking on and passing on as his own? Like we just don't know.
Right.
Stephen Miller.
I think we know that Stephen Miller is running his immigration policy.
Absolutely.
It's that sadistic. So, we can draw those conclusions, but his foreign policy, I mean, it seems like he's pretty much outsourced that to Putin and whoever else. Sam, you were flagging a story that just broke about his director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah. So, and this is a breaking story. Every Monday, every day we wake up and think, what the hell do we have to cover today? And it feels like this is the story that could define our week of news cycles. We don't know everything about this yet, but we know that it appears that Tulsi Gabbard has been compromised, which is not news really, but the news is that it's coming out. And I have a couple of thoughts on this, and one is, we also had a big Epstein dump over the weekend. That was a big story, and it continues to make waves. And now they're telling us that Tulsi Gabbard is compromised. It seems very coincidental.
And we hadn't heard, hide nor hair of her for months until she showed up at Fulton County, Georgia, executing a warrant dating back to the 2020 election. And of course, President Trump claims that he won, which he did not. So that was kind of the first time she popped back into the news for a while. Lavora, I'm curious, what do you think might be going on here? What are you watching for?
So the Fulton County thing is of great concern to me. One, we knew they weren't done with 2020, and we also know that there is a strategic plan of theirs to subvert the elections that are coming up and any elections going forward. And this seizure of whatever they seized from 2020 is part of that plan. And I think that, as we watch states across the country say no to requests for voter rolls and others say yes, I think Americans need to be paying very close attention to what their local elected officials are doing and saying in response to all of this. Because we have to remember, the federal government doesn't administer our elections. Our elections are administered locally in your state, sometimes very, very locally. Here in Michigan, we've got clerks who run elections from their home offices. Like, it's a very local thing. And the fact that the federal government wants to seize anything that has anything to do with it, that wants to get involved in any way, is clearly an attempt to subvert that election, to make it harder for you to vote, to make it harder for you to keep that vote private. All of those things are of concern to me. So I know that there are lots of folks paying attention to it, but in some states, we need more people paying attention to it, because there are folks on the ground who are complicit with the Republicans in Congress and in the federal government in this, and people need to fight back and stand up against it, because your elections are your elections. They are run in your state, and Donald Trump has nothing to do with that and should have nothing to do with that. And just because he can't imagine that he didn't win in 2020, we all know that he didn't win, and we need to make sure that our elections remain free and fair. Now, Tulsi Gabbard, where has she been? Right? That's a very good question. It's very interesting to me that she's appeared now in this story. I think you're right, Sam. I think this is going to be the thing we're talking about this week. Whatever it is, the braveness of a whistleblower in this climate. Whoever you are, thank you. I'm so grateful to folks who are willing to speak up and step out when we are in situations like this, where it is flatly dangerous for you and for your family for you to do so. But whatever it is, given where we are and given who Tulsi Gabbard is, this isn't going to be good.
And I think
there has been just a massive problem with corruption, and with within the Trump administration. Obviously, it starts at the top. I mean, Trump is suing taxpayers for $10 billion,
right,
which is utterly insane. And on with his ballroom and his crypto schemes. So we know that. But even with his staff, you have, his Secretary of Labor has been embroiled in a controversy with her staff and the relationship there. Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski are openly cavorting and using, jets for their own end.
Tom Homan took a sack full of cash.
Right.
Now it's hard to ice. Like,
what else?
Doing?
The FBI director is, getting like private Secret Service protection for his country music girlfriend. So we know that there is a lot going on, even though we don't know the details with Tulsi Gabbard. Do you think that this issue of corruption will be a factor in the 2026 midterms, Lavora?
I do. I think that, what we have seen and what I've seen in some of the polling is that while Americans spend a lot of time thinking there's sort of like a both sidesism of it in politics, that everybody does it, this administration has taken it to another level that folks are like, no, both sides don't do this, right? Like, both sides, it gets messy, both sides do whatever, but both sides don't do this. And the more of it that rolls out, the more of it you see, the more wild and crazy it is. I think it becomes, more fodder for Democrats and progressives to talk about how important it is that we step away from the corruption that we're seeing here, and that we demand that our elected officials, even when they are Republicans, step away. And that's the other thing I want. Like, if you people are living in a place where they're being represented by Republicans, you have to demand that they step up and speak out about this. And if you don't believe that they are corrupt, that's fine. But they also need to be speaking out against the corruption. They need to be speaking out against all that they see going on. If they're not, you need to take them out too. They need to go as well, because this is not the America that we all want to live in. And if they aren't going to step up and speak out for America and Americans, then they need to go as well.
Well, and I think there's something really to that, because, just going back to the Tulsi Gabbard situation, there's a lot we don't know, obviously. But if she were to be found to have done something terrible, we're counting on the Trump administration Republicans to hold her to account. And if they hold her to account, because they're unreliable, we know that they're ultimately stringing her up, right? They're throwing her under the bus. They're hanging her out to dry, so to speak. And how do you even trust that process? You don't know their motives. You don't know all of this. We have one clip before we close out the Tulsi discussion. Can we roll that?
The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, present at an FBI raid?
First of all, it wasn't an FBI raid. It was a search warrant being executed by FBI agents in the middle of the day.
Why was she there?
And secondly, I don't know why the director was there. She is not part of the grand jury investigation, but she is for sure a key part of our efforts at election integrity and making sure that we have free and fair elections. She's an expert in that space, and it's a big part of what she and her team look at every day. But beyond that, I don't, like I said before, this is a grand jury investigation being conducted by a U.S. attorney, and that's where we have to leave it for now.
How do we trust anything that happens in this administration?
We can't trust anything. We can't trust them. It's one of the questions that my daughter asks me is like, how do we break through when they are in charge, right? When they have all of the seats of power. And I said, well, that's why electoral politics continue to be the important part, because we have to take back control of something. And then we have to, as Democrats who take control, exercise every lever of power we have to get into the details of what's going on and clean out the corruption. And that means that, frankly, Democrats are going to have to grow a set of balls. Excuse me. But we can't be afraid to step up and step out. We can't be afraid to push for investigations. We can't just win and then sit back and go, okay, we got it safe now. We've got to, when we take control, and I feel strongly that we will take control, when we take control, then we're going to have to use all the levers we can, including, let's subpoena folks. Like we are really going to have to work hard at digging deep on what all of this mess is and getting it all cleaned out, because they've done such an incredibly good job so quickly of creating a mess and then tucking it nice and neatly under a rug so we can't see the details of it, but we need to see all those details.
Well, I feel like we need to talk about an elephant in the room here with Tulsi. She ran for Congress as a Democrat. She ran for president as a Democrat. Before then, she supported Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign. I believe was on, his board for a very long time. Yeah. And it seems to me that we need to talk about some problems within the Democratic Party too, where some people are compromised. You've seen this on votes for crypto, where a lot of Democrats sided with the administration's interests on that, which is very concerning, especially if you look through the Epstein files that were released. That is a whole subplot about, Jeffrey Epstein being involved in trying to destabilize the dollar as the international currency, and how crypto is part of that. Also, you have a lot of Democrats in leadership who have not wanted to take a stance on stock trading and being divested from what you are actually voting on, because there have been huge conflicts of interest. I feel like in order to win back young voters and independents, Democrats can't just say, well, they're worse. There does seem to have to be some cleaning house in leadership, because even right now we have, a 2-week delay on the DHS budget. Some of the leaders in the Democratic Party already seem to be kind of walking things back and saying, hey, let's just take a little bit of a win and just keep with the status quo. But that's not what voters overall are really asking for, what I'm seeing. But Lavora, you are the expert. You tell me what you think.
I'm glad you brought it up, Susan, because you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of us remember the moment where we as a country all stood with them and said, yes, let's shut down this government. Let's stand firm. And we believed them when they said that they were going to stand firm for healthcare. And then 8 of them sort of trickled away and it all fell apart. And this is a moment where we as Democrats need to do some deep soul searching about who we are as a party and who our leaders are. And now that I am no longer the party chair, I can say and feel things that I couldn't as party chair. And I'm going to tell you, some of these people need to go. Some of these people need to just sit down, because if you can't see past the status quo, if you can't understand that the way you used to govern is not right for this moment right now, it's time for you to let someone else step up and govern. And in this moment, when we can defund ICE when we can make decisions that will save people's lives with a budget, and you're not willing to stand up and do that, then you need to let someone else come in who will. Because as I said, like, these are the levers of power that we have. This is where we could take a stand. And the fact that you won't, the fact that you can't, the fact that you can't make a stand last more than a couple of weeks tells me you're not strong enough for this moment. You're too weak for this moment. And we need folks in there who are willing to fight the fight, because you know what? Americans are fighting the fight. Minneapolis folks are in the streets putting their lives on the line every day for this fight. And you can't hold steady for a couple of weeks in your cushy congressional seat. Like, it's madness. So yeah, go home and let someone who's willing to stand up and fight take your spot, please.
What do you think is their strategic thinking? Like, what is their long-term? What is the
problem, Sam? Right, this is the problem. Number one, Democrats are really bad at long-term strategic thinking. We just suck at it, right? I don't understand why, but we just suck at it. So that's number one. And number two, some of these folks who've been in these jobs for a very long time have self-preservation first at heart, right? And they are very worried about themselves. And that means they're worried about the folks who write them checks. They're worried about the donations that will come in that will help them run their reelections. But we as American citizens need to make them worried about our votes, right? Yep, you might be operating in a strong Dem location, but you know what? We can primary your ass, right? Like, we have to make them understand that if they aren't going to stand up for us, we're going to stand up for us. And that means we might need to take some of them down.
Before we go, I'm going to ask you about Michigan politics, and maybe this is the only thing that you and I are interested in, but you know, Michigan is a huge player on the national scene. So follow us along with this. What do you see going on in Michigan for the midterms? Because I think that there are some factors going on there that are a little different than the rest of the country. You have Mike Duggan, the former Democratic mayor, former Democrat of Detroit, who is running as an independent, and has a base of support, has a whole lot of rich donors out there, and has the potential to not just upend the gubernatorial race, but you also have an open U.S. Senate seat. You have both houses of the legislature up, and you have all major executive offices on the ballot: Secretary of State, Attorney General. We've seen how pivotal those seats are with national elections. The fact that Democrats were, in power made a big difference in 2020 so that Trump could not try and steal votes the way he tried to. So talk to us about what you see happening and what the dynamics are in the great state of Michigan.
Yeah, I'll start with Duggan and the gubernatorial race. My biggest concern is that Mike Duggan is a spoiler here. I believe that in the end, Mike Duggan won't be governor of Michigan. A Republican will, because of his presence in that race. I think that there's this very strong possibility, and if I could figure out a way to convince Mike Duggan to either go run as a Democrat or not run, I would do it, because I think that this moment is too important for us to risk this. And I don't know what his numbers say. I don't know what his calculations are, but everything I know about this state tells me that he's going to pull votes from the Democrat. He might also pull some votes from the Republican, but he's going to pull more votes from the Democrat because he's been a Democrat. And that's going to cause us a serious problem at the top of the ticket. That's number one. Number two, this U.S. Senate race, which is a very interesting race. You've got Haley Stevens, a sitting member of Congress. You've got Mallory McMorrow, a sitting member of the state Senate. And you've got Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed, who ran for governor in 2018, all running very different races for U.S. Senate. And it's a very interesting, you've got Dr. Al-Sayed on the very progressive side, very, very vocal, like literally on the ground in Minneapolis with ICE and fighting against ICE and all of that. You've got Haley Stevens, who's a very, very strong, hardworking member of Congress, sort of taking much of the sort of establishment endorsements and that sort of things. And then you've got Mallory out here who's got this huge national profile because of some of the things that she's done that have been very vocal and it's a very interesting race. I am mostly concerned about who can beat the Republican because that's what matters the most. Yeah, that's what matters the most.
And candidate against Mike Rogers.
Right. And I think it's Haley. I think Haley Stevens is the strongest candidate against Mike Rogers. She's run and won in tough congressional seats. She knows how to toe that line to bring independents over. She's been a strong Democrat. I like to tell people stories that when I needed somebody to show up and shout from the rafters that we needed to vote for Kamala Harris, there was Haley shouting from the rafters every single time. So she's well known inside the Democratic Party for that and for supporter Democrats. I think she's the best. But this is I love having a strong bench. I love that we've got so many great folks from so many different walks of life running. I just think they all need to run as Democrats, Mike Duggan, not as independents. And then, we need to elect a new Secretary of State and a new Attorney General. The Lieutenant Governor just stepped out of the gubernatorial race and into the Secretary of State race and took a lot of endorsements, particularly from labor, right, almost immediately there. I think that's going to be an interesting thing. And these Secretary of State and Attorney General play out at a convention, which folks who are listening might find a little bit old school, but we choose these folks at a state convention in April. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a turnout game. Like, how many folks can each of these candidates get to the convention to support their candidacy? And I'm excited about that. I'm a little bit worried on the Attorney General side. I've seen some stories about one of the candidates, the Oakland County prosecutor, where there's some questions about her. Yeah, Karen McDonald. I think that becomes an issue in a general election that we don't want to have to deal with. I happen to live in Washtenaw County, and I'm very, very, very much interested in seeing Ellie Savitt win that race. He is a terrific prosecutor and will make an excellent attorney general. So I'm allowed, now that I'm not the chair anymore, to have positions on all of these things, and I'm enjoying doing that. But it's going to be an interesting convention. If y'all could watch it, I would tell you to watch, but we don't televise our conventions.
So we'll find some way to cover it.
Yes, please.
Like, I feel like we know someone.
You know somebody who can
somebody.
Walk in. Yes.
Great. Well, Lavora, thank you so much for being here. We love having you on Lincoln Square, and we're looking forward to having you on some more. And thank you for walking us through an extremely eventful week, not just in Democratic politics, but just in general.
Thanks so much for having me. I'll come back anytime.
Next time we need you for like 2 hours.
Okay,
I think.
let's do it.
Block it off because we could keep going. Thank you.
Thank you both.
How was your weekend, Sam?
Yeah, good. Good.
Think about it, so I'm not sure it was that good.
You know what? I feel like, and maybe everyone in the chat, I'm kind of looking over at the chat as I always do. I feel like weekends now, I'm just living out some kind of trauma. Like, I wake up on Saturday and I'm like, I don't want to look at the phone because I don't want to know what happened. Right. And I think this weekend we made it through. I mean, obviously there were, the Epstein files and all of this, but it was a pretty good weekend. What about you?
Yeah, no, I have to say the Epstein files really put a huge pall on the weekend for me. Yeah. I mean, they were so disturbing. And we have to preface this by saying, of course, maybe half of the documents have been released and they're saying, maybe. That's it. Right. And we all know that so much of the serious stuff has been redacted. At the same time, we know that you have so many victims and their privacy has just been shattered while people, the people who were doing these awful crimes are still being protected. And I have to say, some of the accounts that were going around very heavily on social media, it was very difficult to read. And I can only imagine how difficult it was for the survivors to have to go through this again, because it's like every few weeks, it's more trauma and there's no justice.
I'll be honest, I stayed away from it as much as I could this weekend because I just needed that sort of emotional space. But I think it's a thing we all have to really look at. We all need to see it, and we need to reckon with it, and we need to remember, these are the stakes. These are the stakes. Trump woke up this morning and decided, like, all of our allies are moving away from us. The economy is on shaky ground. ICE is killing people in American cities, and he wants to sue Trevor Noah because he made jokes about him at the Grammys. Like, this is where we are. And meanwhile,
we're back to Jimmy Kimmel. It's like the old playbook. All of
it. And it's, Tulsi Gabbard, the Epstein files, all of that, we need to really focus on what's really important and really what's at stake. And that's, why I'm really, it's hard to be in media right now because of all the shit we have to cover, but I'm really glad that we get to be, because we are exposing this stuff and we're talking about it, and everyone in the chat, you are part of this as well.
Yeah.
It's what
we appreciate your comments. I'm seeing Armenian Bishop is coming to us from San Francisco, and that's where I am today. So hello. We appreciate all of your comments and you being part of this. I think after the weekend, we all kind of need that with this show. So I really love that you're all part of this, and our chat is always very active. We always have some pro-Trumpers that show up, which makes things a little spicy, which is fun. But we have a good week coming up on Lincoln Square, and we're hoping that you'll stay with us for that. Today, Stuart Stevens will be back with Simon Rosenberg. I'm sure they will have a really interesting take on what just went down in Texas with the special elections, and the fact that Mike Johnson now has a 1-vote majority. So basically his speakership rides on a bowel movement. So that's fun. We also are going to have Stuart drop by on Anchor Watch with Bobby Jones, and we're going to talk a little bit about Marco Rubio's testimony last week in the Senate, which we has been one of those stories that in normal times would have been a big story, but was maybe story number 20, but is still very significant. And Stuart has a lot of insight into Rubio and his family and Cuba and the immigration issue. So that will be a great discussion.
Always interesting to talk about that. I just want to go back to one thing. I think you could describe Mike Johnson's speakership as a bowel movement.
Yes,
I just want
that would be fair.
It doesn't just ride on it is anyway.
Yeah, because and like someone who is extremely constipated, because he's only like come up with a couple bills this entire time that really passed. So not really his forte in passing things.
Oh my God. This is getting really good.
I just took it and ran with it. Sorry.
You did. I appreciate that. I really love that. I love that about us. I like that.
Great fodder for Monday morning. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, everyone.
Let's see. What else do we have this week? Christopher Mathias, longtime journalist from HuffPo. You've seen him on MSNBC and a bunch of places. He has a new book. He'll be on First Draft with me on Wednesday. Looking forward to that. And we have Kat Abugazela, who is a progressive running for Congress in the suburbs of Chicago. She has been very active in fighting ICE, actually got arrested at a protest. And she's going to be by to share that with us. She's also, a former media figure. She was on Media Matters for years. She was one of those folks that was really tracking what was going on at a cellular level with the far right. And now she's running against what they're doing when they're in power. So I think that'll be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, we've had her on back in the Resolute days and on LP, and she's a real talent. And it, I was surprised to see her enter the race when she did, but I was like, oh yeah, that's great. She's a communicator. I'm really excited for that interview. It'll be
and
really
she's
good.
One of, just a spate of young people who are running, from Gen Z and millennials, because, to Lavora's point, if you're not going to lead, get out of the way. And there are some people who are saying, we're not going to wait for you to finally retire if you're not doing the job that people want you to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Great week.
Great week. And
Great
I'm
week.
sure we'll have a lot more that, check the schedule regularly. Like last week, I think when you and I were talking at this time, we're like, we're talking about the journalists that we're going to have on to talk about Minneapolis. And then, at the end of the week, you had Liz Winstead, who was on, longtime comedian who is from Minneapolis, who emceed the rally against ICE. She was on. Max Burns dropped by to review the week with you. So we're always trying to keep on top of breaking news. So, stay with us. Our coverage is ever evolving.
Yes.
But as far as our weekly assignment for all of us this week, we need to keep the pressure on our senators on DHS funding deal, because we're already seeing Senate Majority Leader Thune is trying to do the rope-a-dope on it and saying, well, we can just keep continuing resolutions forever and ever and never give in on anything that ICE is doing to terrorize not just the people of Minneapolis, but so many communities across the country.
Yep.
And it's this is a position that I think we need to stress is extremely unpopular. Independents hate ICE now. This was not the case months ago. The public does not like what is going on in their communities, and they are saying that with a clear voice. So tell your senators, whether you're represented by Democrats or Republicans, that you do not want any more vote on any more DHS ICE funding until they stop terrorizing communities, wearing masks, trying to deport American citizens, and let's go to the fundamentals: killing people on our streets.
Yes.
That's a red line.
It's not surprising that that's unpopular, but some of the polling that's out today or over the weekend shows that even non-college educated whites and white men are at least 50-50 on ICE, which is Trump's, eating away at Trump's base. And it just shows how terribly unpopular those optics are. And I think that for your assignment, make sure that, look, if they get routed in the election, great, but they should be acting now,
right,
before the election. This is an immediate issue that has to take precedence over just about everything.
Yeah,
they need to know they're going to get routed.
Right. And, to that end, this is an issue that we have actually seen some Republicans in office move on. There were 7 Republicans that sided with Democrats on this issue. We can keep up the pressure. It's really difficult out there, and it's very tempting to say, Republicans run everything. What can we do? But there are things that we can do. They are movable, and we just need to keep the pressure on so that they don't back away and, give in to the pressure of Stephen Miller and Trump, but they're actually listening to the majority out there.
Yep. I'm going to roll that Capitol switchboard number again.
And we'll put it, and when you see us post this show later, we will also put it in there for you as well.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Susan.
Always good to be with you on Monday morning. Thanks for being here.